Well. Thought I'd jump in here. This might be a long one. So if you don't have time, do me a favor. Make sure that you subscribe or hit the like button because I'd like to help you kind of see how my brain works. Now, this is what we call the success code. And it came from many of you run with me because you're in the real estate world. And there's a challenge that happens with selling real estate. There's capacity challenges, there's time challenges. And I started to really hold accountable my hours, meaning I could only work with so many buyers at a given time. I could work with a certain number of listings. And I really started to look at the math around my yeses and nos. So the success code came from looking back and connecting the dots on how I introduced other income streams. See, 10 years ago when Charlie had open heart surgery, what I realized was I didn't have a business, I had a job. And when I stopped showing up, I stopped getting paid. And it was at that time that I made the decision that I would no longer be beholden to just one income stream. So here's what I'd like you to think about is most of you have one income stream right now. And if you're going along, we have a pretty good idea of how many hours that you have to put in, what it is that you have to do for input versus output. Now, we're going to be talking about phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 income during this. Now, what we do is we spend 80% of our time usually to make 20% of the money in the beginning, and that's what we call phase 1. Phase 1 oftentimes is where we learn, meaning there's other things that we could do to make more money in phase 1. However, we are working on skill set, time on task, and experimentation. Now, in phase 1, we're learning, and then in phase 2 is what we do is we drop the L. We're no longer a loser, and we are starting to earn. So work with me for a minute. I want you to think about how many hours a week you want to work. See, most people that I know work a lot more hours than what I do. However, they don't hold their hours accountable to the level that I do. So for example, we'll use 40 hours. What I challenge you to do is figure out what's the least amount of hours that you can spend in order to get the outcome that you're getting. And we've heard of the 80-20 rule. So here's my goal. My goal is to figure out what is the 20% that I need to do that will make 80% of the money. And then I'm going to stop doing the 80% that makes 20% of the money. So let's look at the math here. If you're working 40 hours a week, 20% of that is 2 times 4. That's 8 hours. How can I work 8 hours a week to make 80% of my income? Now, here's what we do. Once we start to identify input versus output, I'd like for you to introduce a new revenue stream. And when you introduce a new revenue stream, you're going to put in 3 hours a week. Even if you're working a 40-hour-a-week job, everybody that I know has 3 hours a week that they can put into something. Now, think about this. Most people go to the gym and they're like all excited on New Year's and they're like, this is the year that I'm going to get in shape. And then they go work their butts off for 30 days and they're so sore they can't even walk, and then they stop showing up. Here is the key to introducing new income streams or anything in life. We need commitment on the front end. We need consistency on the back end. See, it starts becoming a math equation. Now, when we're starting a new success code, we're going to spend 3 hours a week because the first thing that we're going to work on is skill set. Meaning, until you have a skill set, for example, when you're going to the gym, if you go in there and you don't know how to work the equipment, well, it doesn't matter how much time on task you have. You need the skill set to use the equipment. And once you have the skill set, they can never take it away from you. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on skill set. Second thing is time on task. Third thing is experimentation until we get through and have a victory. Once we have victory, we have confidence. And it might take you, for example, EXP. When I started my own coaching business on January 1st, 2016, my number one focus was to get our coaching income to $10,000. Everything else was a distraction, and that's where 50-25-1 came from. I identified the experimentation, which turned into action to a victory. I knew if I had one conversation a day that could completely transform someone's life, or it's more like September 11th, everybody remembers where they were. My goal was to have a conversation with another human being where they could remember where we were when we had that conversation. I knew if I could have a conversation like that every single day and then book another conversation, if I did that 365 days a year, I would win. So what I did was in my schedule, everything that I did was getting to that $10,000 a month. Until I got to that $10,000, I had to hold every single hour accountable that I was working to those results. Have a call, book a call. Once I got to $10,000, that allowed us to breathe a little bit, meaning we were no longer going backwards. We were no longer going into savings. Now, phase 2 was $12,500. Now, once I got to $12,500, it gave us a little bit more fun. It gave us a little bit more flexibility. Now, we're going to fast forward today to the phases that I use. Phase 1 income is $10,000. Phase 2 is $20,000. Phase 3 is $30,000. So what happened was when I was going through phase 1 with building the coaching business, I didn't have the skill sets. So figuring out what scheduling program to use, what billing program to use, what Kajabi with digital income and all of that stuff. It took me a while to figure out that skill set. It took me time on task. It took me experimentation until that experimentation turned into action. Now I know exactly what it takes for me to produce income in coaching, and it becomes a math equation. So it used to take me, 30 to 40 hours a week. I can now do in anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week. Now stick with me on here. I took my coaching income from phase 1, which was 10,000, to 20,000, which was phase 2, and I started to flex it into up to 30,000. Now, in March 1st, 2016, when I joined EXP, I started spending 3 hours a week on my skill set around the company, meaning I would go and watch YouTube videos. I would go to meetings. And what happened was I worked on my skill set. I got time on task and I was experimenting. Now, this was 18 months of no victories, no success. And here's part of why I didn't have any victories. Because my experience with EXP when I first came over wasn't awesome. It took me 3 months to become part of our board. Now, there's other things that was going on. I was focused in other areas, so it wasn't urgent and important. Yet I was afraid that if people came over that I cared about, that their business would suffer. Until this. After spending 3 hours a week for 18 months, my friend Cheryl said, Hank, I'm coming to EXP. And I said, don't come. It's going to hurt your business. She goes, Hank, I bought stock when you came over. I'm coming over. Now, this is where things get excited. So for 18 months, I was stuck in skill set, time on task, experimentation of the success code. Then I got a victory. Cheryl came over. She had success. She was able to sell real estate. In fact, her business actually improved. And this is where I want you to pay attention. An income was generated from her coming over. So I went from phase 1 of the success code to phase 2. See, in the beginning, what you're doing is you're learning. Once you learn, you drop the L because you're no longer a loser, and you start to earn. Now, from June of 2017 till January 1st, 2018, I had 95 agents join me. Now, think about that. It was slow to get started because I needed time on task. I needed to know what I didn't know. So we have the coaching income and then EXP income came in. See, what happens is now your time starts to become a math equation. So I was spending 20 hours a week on coaching. I was spending 3 hours a week on EXP. I was spending 3 hours a week on digital income. Now, let's talk about that. So EXP is growing because it's time on task over time. Now we've got digital income. Well, 10 years ago, when I read the 4-Hour Work Week from Timothy Ferriss, I thought, you know what? I like what that looks like. And so for many years, I was dealing with things like Infusionsoft and investing money and learning. And I didn't know what I didn't know until I got pissed off one day. Now, I got pissed off because I was having conversations and people would go from selling real estate into being a team leader. And I would tell them exactly what would happen. I said, here's what I predict is going to happen. And then they wouldn't believe me. And then a year later, they'd come back and say, Hank, it's exactly what happened. So here's where I want you to look at is a lot of times what you're doing is you're working on skill set, time on task, experimentation until it's implementation. And people underestimate what the speed of implementation means. And I got really ticked off and I did a video and I said, screw it. I'm going to do an 8-week course on why you should just do 36 deals a year and the math behind it. And all I had was a pain point. Now, when I had that pain point, what happened was I was working on skill set, time on task until the right time came. And within 72 hours, I sold over $7,000 of a digital product that I hadn't even created yet. See, that was my victory, which gave me confidence. Now, since then, in digital products, we've done through Kajabi, and I believe that I can share these numbers, so I will. $461,190 in all-time revenue as of June 11th, 2020. Now, that was done all through someone going to a website, putting in their credit card, and paying us an income. So we currently have 3 income streams that produce over 6 figures a year. We've got coaching, we've got digital income, we've got EXP rev share. From there, we have 6 other income streams that are between that $1,000 and $100,000 per year range. And we're working on the success code of all of them, meaning we're working on skill set, we're working on time on task, experimentation to figure out the activities that will produce the income. So for example, we have VRBO. We have the retreat home where the first year what we did was we just wanted a couple rentals, where we wanted to figure out what is it like where someone raises their hand, they come to the property, they rent the property. What does it take to go ahead and clean the property? What is all involved for the input versus output? And then how much energy does it take to net the amount of money that we would? See, the success code, what it does is it gives us a formula to work on skill set, time on task, experimentation until we figure out the activities, which experimentation turns into activities to get the win, to get the confidence. Now, when we go from phase 1 to phase 2, that's where the hours can change in your schedule. So for example, here's my goal: to be able to do 20% of the work to make 80% of the money in 5 different income streams. Stick with me. What most people do is they think more, 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 more. I believe in subtraction leads to multiplication. And so as soon as I figure out the 20% that makes 80% of the money, I move on to another success code. And my goal is to have 5 success codes where I do 20% of the work to make 80% of the money. And then what happens is that other 80% ends up filtering in with time on task over time. So here's what I'm going to challenge you to do. Be more intentional with your time. I've tracked every single hour that I've worked from January 1st, 2016 until now. And what it does is it allows you to figure out your input versus output. When I said yes to this, what was the output what was the outcome that I was agreeing to based on me saying yes? And by looking back, what we can do is we can get better at our standards and principles on where we say yes and where we say no. So we can start making decisions on our time on whether we're working on short-term income or long-term income, whether we're working on trading dollars for hours or whether or not we're working on an active passive income. See, so many of us like to fly by the seat of our pants. Hank, I couldn't imagine living off of your schedule. I couldn't imagine being as broke as some as you are. I couldn't imagine being as not as confident about what I say yes to on what the outcome's going to be. See, many people think that like this schedule like holds you back or restricts you. Do you know how much freedom this schedule gives me? Do you know how much freedom it gives me that I don't have to work 80, 90, 100 hours a week? What I do is I hold the hours that I say yes to a standard, and it's all based off of the success codes. Now, here's the cool thing is when you build the success codes properly, what they are, as you can see, they're a 6-sided polygon. They start to build a foundation. And every success code that you build starts building a stronger foundation, and they start playing off each other. And then when you move from one income stream to another, oftentimes you move through the success code faster because they play off each other. So I don't know if I lost all of you on this. We start getting into another level of conversation. when we start getting here. Yet here's what I'd like for you to take from this. Start being intentional with your time so it becomes a math equation. Look to see what you can get away with not doing. Do the 20% that makes 80% of the money. And when you get there, introduce another success code. So then you're doing 20% of the work to make 80% of the money. Then you bring in another success code where you're spending 80% of the time to make 20% of the money. So you got to know your numbers because you'll end up going backwards sometimes in order to shoot forward. The key is once you figure out that success code and you have the victory and you get the confidence, you go from doing 80% of the work to make 20% of the money to being able to do 20% of the work to make 80% of the money. And this is where subtraction leads to multiplication. If you have two different things that you're doing 20% of the work to make 80% of the money, that's 160% of the money. Tracking with me? See, there's a point where I gave up selling residential real estate because by subtracting out real estate, it allowed me to spend more time, energy, and effort into income streams that could be scalable, didn't involve as many other human beings. So if you like what I'm talking about here, I'm going to continue to do YouTube videos. If you have questions or you'd like me to go deeper on a particular topic, put it in the comments. That's where we're going to be pulling where we're doing the videos from. Now, some of you will be like, Hank, why are you giving this all away? And here's why. Information is a commodity. Proximity and implementation is what people pay me for now. And we can talk about the math around proximity and who we're spending time with. And yet, here's what I would encourage you to do. What Zig Ziglar says, help more people get what they want. You'll get everything that you want. So if you like this, go ahead and like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. My goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers before my birthday on July 3rd, and that would be a great birthday present if you could help me get there. Thank you for your time. I am going to go enjoy this beautiful day. Goodbye.